Hi. I wanted to update a few things for folks about me and what's going on with some of my material. I have now completed to the point where I feel very comfortable in putting the interpersonal communication leadership course on the market for people to begin to sign up for. This is a program where it's going to be a little different program than you're used to. It's 12 weeks long. We meet one day a week for 2 hours whenever the teams decide that's best. It's restricted to 6 people per course. And I won't run the course unless I can get at least 3. A minimum of 3 people have to be in for me to do the course. Otherwise, the experience isn't right. And we certainly are not going to have more than 6 people, plus myself, in the group. We cover what this course does. The purpose of this course is something that came about while I was towards the end of my leadership at realm of my profession into my early consulting years. I discovered in meeting with leaders that at that time leadership development, external leadership development, where people were being sent to 3 days of leadership courses or a week of leadership courses, or companies were outsourcing leadership development. And there was what I've discovered, they would come back from these programs and they would have a pretty good grasp of what they were learning in the leadership program skills area. Like if they went to a conflict training session and they came back, they were pretty well versed on the steps to resolve a conflict, diffuse it, that kind of stuff. So whether it was conflict or whether it was team building or whether it was how to do performance reviews, providing feedback, or whether it was maybe about maybe it was a DEI kind of program where their objective was to deal with a variety of diversity and culture and optimize the workforce in that way. Whatever those skills were. Basically, over my years, I discovered that there's probably about 12 skills that leaders use consistently, day in and day out. So I kind of narrowed it down to make sure the course was manageable to 11 of those skill sets. And then we spent some time the last day talking about how you get this to work in your organization. Because what I found was that people would go away to leadership training, they would come back, they would try to implement that, and they knew what they were doing. They were following the steps, but the way that they were trying to implement those steps just didn't work well with employees. It seemed unnatural, or outright offensive, or maybe they didn't perceive the person knew what they were talking about. And it wasn't that they didn't know the skill set that they were taught. It was that I discovered this was in how they were approaching and presenting these skills to their employees. It came across almost like a stochastic and structured program. It didn't seem natural, and these employees have worked with these leaders, so they kind of know them, and it didn't seem to be them, is kind of the feedback I was getting from employees. Because I started asking, look, this is a pretty good program. I've taught this myself. What is it that's a problem here that you find difficult about, implementing what this leader would like you to do? And it came down to the way that they were presented. It came down to actually communication. But more than communication, it came down to what I come to term, well, I didn't term this, it's actually a communication term that it's actually a field taught in colleges under the communication programs, but I look at it a little different than they do. I look at it as sort of a combination of social psychology and communication, which is kind of how I ended up viewing it after going through all my college work. I've gone through 8 years of graduate and postgraduate work, almost had a doctorate, just ran out of ability to do it. And between having a family and traveling and consulting, it wasn't easy. So that was a little bit of a problem. But all through that education, 8 years of that education, and the whole time I was doing that education, I was actually implementing what I was learning. In fact, in some cases, I was doing things that they weren't teaching yet, and then I would go back and they would have me spend some time in the class instructing the class on what I was doing in some of the work I was doing, because I was doing most of it between Europe and the United States. And so there was quite a few things that I was out there experimenting and changing, but basically using the theory that I had been taught and then applying it to what really seemed to work versus what maybe the theory was saying. So it was kind of a combination of theory plus customization to try to make it fit. And I found that worked real well in developing leaders and changing organizational culture. So what I did was I basically discovered, because I was seeing that it wasn't necessarily the topic or a lack of knowledge about the skill that these leaders had problems with. It was how they were discussing it or communicating it and trying to get these people to change their behavior a little bit. And some of it lacked a sense of compassion, or maybe we would say empathy, and it was a little harsh, a little more direct than I would have liked to have seen him do it. So as we began to discover these and assess this with the employees and bring this back and talk to the leaders, because that's how I do things. I try to use evidence-based information to help the leader, not just here's what I think. And so we laid this all out, and it began to be pretty consistent across not just the leaders in the company that I was consulting with, but between the companies I was consulting with, there was a consistent pattern also. So basically, I began to research the leadership courses that were being taught, the skills that were being taught, and the content of those courses. And lo and behold, I'm finding there's no part of the course that's really focused on how you transfer what you're learning into your organization effectively. So that was one of the things that got me going in the direction I've been going. And so I spent time doing this. I didn't really tell people that it was a program or a course or anything, because it wasn't at that time. It was just me working with individuals. So I discovered a couple of things. One, there is a need for what we call interpersonal communication. Now, let me help you understand what I mean by that. Interpersonal is a social psychological genre. It's the ability to interface and connect with someone else in a way that you are impactful, not just through your words or action or your title or your position, but one of those things that creates the right emotion in somebody that makes them feel like they want to do what you ask them to do. And if this is done correctly and doesn't go too far with that, and you can go too far and do some really bad things with it. But from a good perspective, the idea is the connection is a person-to-person connection that creates emotional feelings that most people tend to build their trust around. And so trusting that this was the right thing to do. And so this idea of what we know today as emotional intelligence, in the 80s and 90s, we didn't know what that was. Nobody had thought about even positive intelligence at that time. But this emotional intelligence, which is actually a term coined by Daniel Goleman, a Harvard psychologist who actually didn't engage himself as much in this scenario of this work about emotional intelligence until he was a reporter. I think it was for the Chicago Tribune, but I'm not sure. But it was, I think it was in Chicago, wherever the paper was. And he was doing work writing about this and discussing it. And he began to see these connections between empathy and people responding, compassion, and the other aspects of emotional intelligence. And the idea that you need to do two things. You need to understand a little bit about you and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about empathy when it comes to you. So emotional intelligence or empathy relative to yourself as an individual. Then there is this idea of understanding that in other people, or being able to see it in other people when they need it, if they need it, empathy, how to apply it effectively given who this person was. So there's some things when we discuss that aspect of the course that we dig deeper into, and you should too. If you're a leader and you haven't, and this seems new to you, you need to dig into it, and I'll put some links that you can go to play with it, starting to play with it. The idea here seems to be that interpersonal relationships are critical in the leadership side. It's not just, I have control over this person, they got to do what I say. There's a rationale to getting them engaged with you, and together you feeling the success of what's going on, those kinds of things. So to do that, the only way you can do it, because actually in interpersonal relationships and emotional intelligence, by definition, means you have at least one other person involved, if not like a team, or if you're talking about it to an audience, but at least one person more is involved. So anytime there's more than one person involved, the way you communicate, the way you help people understand that, the way you relate that to people, is through communication. So communication is also a process like emotional intelligence is. It has component pieces to it that you must do well in order for people to grasp it and understand it, what you're saying, and provide you the feedback they understand. So there's a process, there's this, and I call it a closed system. There's the message design, and then there's the delivery of the message, and then there's all kinds of barriers that can get in the way that you have to minimize in order for that message to be delivered. Then there's the receiving of the message, and that person and everything that's involved with that, and how they interpret what you're saying from nonverbal behaviors, which are either congruent or incongruent with what you say. Then that person is kind of mulling this over in their mind. They've received this message through a variety of senses: auditory, visual, just several different ways that they're assuming that message. Now, you don't know whether if we stopped right there, you don't know whether they received the message or not. So the way you know is through feedback. And the feedback is either they do what you say, exactly what you say, and it's perfect, or they say to you something like, I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean, which is a feedback. And then you have to engage in some active listening, which is what we call intentional attention, or you got to pay really closer attention when you're listening to this person. Now, when you're doing this and you're talking about doing a task, you have one way of receiving and listening and hearing the feedback and discussing it. If you're into an interpersonal relationship issue where empathy is required, there's a different approach you have to take when you're active listening, because you're taking in the information from what this person is saying, but the emotions associated with what they're saying, the emotions of that internal relationship are more contingent upon the nonverbal behaviors. So you have to know what nonverbal behaviors are. You have to be able to sense them. You have to be able to categorize them. You have to be able to rate them, and you have to be able to make sense of them in order for you to respond correctly. Now, if you can grasp that, then once you have that and you have that connection, you almost become synchronized to the point where when you're listening to this person talking, your whole body is beginning to have the same kind of reaction that person who is experiencing is having. And it's not that you have to agree with it, but to be able to feel it tells you and helps you decide what you need to do to regulate it, to take it where you know it needs to be useful and helpful and be able to make change. So if you want employees to accept the new concept that you're trying to introduce to them, it is an interpersonal relationship, and it is a knowledge, new skills thing that they have to learn. But they have to feel comfortable with it and learning it before they will grasp it and apply those skills. And that's where the interpersonal side. So I wrote a book called Navigating Conversations. And the reason I wrote that book is because I wanted people to grasp the concept that there's a point where, in fact, the subtitle of the book is Emotional Intelligence, where emotional intelligence intersects with the mastery of communication. So you have to understand how these two things relate to each other. They're inextricably intertwined so tightly, so dependent upon each other, that you can't have emotional intelligent experiences like empathy. You can't or interrelate about empathy or have empathy towards someone unless you understand where you're coming from at that point, where you're coming from, but also how that other person is, being able to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. But to do that, it requires a good deal of knowledge about how to communicate in a way that you're connecting effectively to be able to show that empathy correctly, and then to do something with it. The two of you do something with it. And that was the piece that has been missing in most leadership development, is we don't recognize that somebody learning how to manage conflicts is really as much about the interpersonal relationship and how you engage yourself with that person as it is the steps and processes for diffusing and tension, identifying the issues, taking it off and it being personal, putting it onto the specific issue, coming to some, discussions about how you can correct it. In other words, resolving it. Now, those are to be the steps. But in order to do that, you have to first have that connection, or that's just not going to take. they're not going to do it. And that's what I was seeing. And that's what this course is all about. Interpersonal Communication Leadership course is all about understanding how to use the right communication processes correctly, when to use them, how to use them, in order to connect interpersonally with the individuals that you are applying a particular leadership skill with. And so those processes of both interpersonal relationships and communication have different components or different ways that you need to use those skill sets depending on the leadership skill you're applying. So if you're applying it for conflict management, there's a certain way you're going to connect with that individual, interpersonally connect with that individual, and there's a certain set of the communication processes that might be more important than other parts of the communication processes to emphasize. And that would be different for if you were doing a conflict resolution issue, or maybe you were having a team building session where you were trying to get people to come together and collaborate, or maybe it would be that you're trying to establish the integration of diversity to a culture so that you can have a bigger, wider breadth of people to draw from, and more different approaches and ideas about how to do things. That would be a DEI kind of approach to it. Or you could have a problem discussion where you have a situation where somebody said they were sexually harassed and you have to go in and resolve that issue. So each one of those has some unique aspects that change in both the communication and the interpersonal process. And your ability to know both of those processes well enough to know how to use them effectively for a particular skill set, a leadership skill set you're doing, is where we've made our mistakes in developing leaders in the past. We have not given them that part of the formula, so we've kind of sent them in with half of the plan to be successful, and most of the time, or a lot of the times, they're not. There's research to show that people go to leadership development programs, come back, and when you ask them whether they had any impact on the employee, less than 20% of the people that have taken leadership courses said, no, 20% of us had an impact. Well, that's not a good return on investment for your leadership dollars. And by the way, those are no small amounts. We average about $160 billion annually on leadership development alone. So this is stuff I discovered over the years. Now, how did I discover that? Well, you can kind of imagine. One, I had a formal education in communication. Most people don't. The vast majority of people in this country have never had courses in communication. They've had language, they've had spelling, they've had grammar, they may have had debate. But relative to what I'm talking about, this idea of understanding the process of all of the total interaction of communication between two people, the process that goes on, combined with using that as part of the interpersonal tools that you need to connect and make a connection and gain the confidence of that individual, who then looks at you and says, you appear competent, you appear to be knowing what you're doing, you care about me, you're compassionate about wanting to help me, you're consistent with doing this in and day out, and I understand what you're saying, your actions also tell me that's the same thing. So this is what we're doing. This is what we're missing right now, that we need to get into leadership development. So this course isn't necessarily to teach you communication. It's trying to teach you. It is teaching you communication, what the process of communication is, which most people don't even know what goes on when two people are talking to each other. They don't even consider it. It seems natural. They've been doing it since they were 2 years old. When you were trying to influence mom, you'd cry. So yeah, but we talk about how that is evolving, how it evolved when you were a child. And we talk about the neuroscience associated with what brain parts you're using and how to maybe control that. And so some of the things that you have to learn in this process, and this is not something you learn in a 2-day course. This is something you learn in an ongoing set of courses like I'm teaching, the 12-week program, where you can practice it and discuss it and practice it and discuss it. And your mind begins, the neuroplasticity of your brain is one nerve hitting another nerve along the same trail there. And finally, it's building up something that says, yeah, this is the way we need to do it. I got this now. I know how to do it. And you keep building and building and building, and you keep getting better and better. And that comes through practice. It comes through making mistakes and correcting and practicing. So you should expect that as part of the process. So what this course is designed to do is introduce you to that theory, introduce you to the concept that there's more to conflict management than just the concepts of conflict management. There is the human and personal side of that you have to manage effectively, as well as you do the steps to reducing conflict and solving conflict. So I wanted to let you know that course is out there. It'll be run. I'm normally going to try to offer it to companies, and particularly the small businesses that don't get a chance to get the kind of training I gave billion-dollar corporations. This model here reduces the cost enough to where you don't have to pay exorbitant amount of money to have that same kind of training right there in your restaurant as a restaurant owner. Your people and yourself, all of your people engaged in this would make just tremendous difference in terms of them wanting to come to work, excited about being there, making the customer happy, all that kind of stuff. So, the best way normally to do something that's seminar based and has a minimum and maximum requirement of people is to offer it to companies who have the resources and funds to pay for 6 people to go to a class and see the value of it and everything like that. But it's such an opportunity for an individual who's a leader, who doesn't want to or isn't, maybe they're an individual coach or something like that, and they may not have the resources to pay for a 12-week program, although it's really the cost I've associated with is comparable to a course for a semester at a college. So I can't give you college credit hours for it, at least yet. Maybe down the road we can do that, but it isn't the credit hours, and it isn't the course certificate that matters. It's, can you do it? Can you really make the changes that will turn these Gallup assessments around to make employees start really appreciating leadership more? That's where the value of it is. So I'm not putting this together for certifications. I'm putting this together because you're going to learn something that I'm thinking isn't being taught in leadership development, or by companies now, or by a lot of mentors and coaches who don't have the background enough to put this all together. If you can imagine me having that amount of education, plus a lot of ongoing education after that, where I've taught myself or signed up for courses or went and audited programs in major universities under some professors who have a particular thought process. I did all of that. And then put on top for like 40 years. Now, put on top of that think about, I was in human resource areas, so a lot of my background was solving problems, interfacing with people, correcting things, evaluating things with people, getting change to happen. I worked, one organization I worked with closely with an industrial psychologist for 5 years. I felt like I had a PhD program in psychology with this guy. We worked on some really super programs. Now, take all that and then consider how many people, how many situations I resolved, how many things out of all of those leadership skill sets I was engaged with day in, day out, 2,080 hours plus a year, every year for 40 years. All of those people, all the different varieties of things I dealt with, all the training I did with all of these multiple groups of people over 40 years, you get to be able to feel how this works, how it can make things happen, how you can, in fact, through interpersonal communication, create an excitement that you have about something in someone else to the point where they are physically affected by that excitement the same way you are. That is the lifeline to other people, your employees. We have failed to teach leaders that now we can get that experience. We can talk about that for at least 12 weeks. 12 weeks will get you started. That'll get you going and we'll get going. And then there's the area that I'm not an expert in called emotional intelligence. You can go get a hold of Daniel Goldman and enroll in his program. He has a lot of people teaching his program. And go get that. Go really get into that, understand that. I've got you covered on the communication side with this course, and you're going to learn a lot. You can always come back to me, and we can continue to discuss it on an ongoing basis for as long as I'm alive. So you got that. Then you can go get the emotional intelligence. And then I'm going to recommend you go spend the same amount of time and the same amount of money just about with Shirzad Shamin's positive intelligence group, because there's a different bent on it over there that's about you, more about you and what you need to do to help yourself understand a little more. So there's that three-pronged approach of communication, emotional intelligence, and positive intelligence combined is a super powerhouse to help you become that lifeline to your employees and gives you the capabilities of interacting them in a way that excites them and gets them excited. That's what you're striving for. That's what you want, because then you know them well enough. You can read them well enough to trust them, to release them. And you're gonna find that the difference between you and the employee as a leader, that whole world changes. Now take that and magnify that to the whole organization you're working in. Why do you have to restrict it to your people? Why couldn't you start building community within the whole organization? And once, I promise you, once people see how this works for you, you will continually be bombarded about how can I figure out how to make this work for us? And then it becomes a disease. It becomes infectious in the organization, and the whole organization wants it. That's how I started in a particular department. I ended up with a full-blown multi-million-dollar transformation process in a corporation on this. So that's how it happens. But it can start small. It can start with you. It can start with another department. It can start as a department. Or a corporation can recognize it and infuse it. It's normally easier to do it department by department, but like I said, I just did it with a whole corporation, and it worked, and it makes a difference. It changes people. So anyway, I wanted you to let you know a little bit about this course, the history of it. You know, the idea that if you think about somebody who's had 40 years of this kind of interaction, every kind of thing you can think of in an organization, and a relationship between leadership and people, and over and over and over again, you begin to learn what works and how to do it. And so that's why I'm saying you've got to. The one thing is we just haven't made that connection yet. It's the one problem I have with leadership development right now. They send you out there with some skill sets, but they don't send you out there with the capability to get your skill sets introduced to your people properly. And that's why people don't have a lot of success with leadership programs that they try to bring back in the organization. But anyway, that's available. That's on my website, victorvogel.com. We'll put that up there, so you can see that. You can go listen. You can schedule an appointment, a video conference, when we can sit down and chat. Just, get ready to get excited, because I'm excited. And so you're going to have a hard time not getting excited if I'm excited about it. And if you're interested in this at all, if you're a coach, if you're a mentor, whatever, I am one person. I think I have a program that's probably going to grow fast down the road and a lot faster than I'm capable of taking it. So this isn't something I built to make a lot of money for me. This is something I built because after retiring for 15 years and not seeing progress in leadership, I got frustrated. And so I've spent the last 7 years of my life, in my retirement life, with my nose in research and assessing and talking with people. And that's where this all snapped for me in the last year and a half or 2 years. And it took me that long to figure out how and where to make it work, what the connection was. And that meant I had to see programs like positive intelligence and emotional intelligence. These are new since the last 1990s, my last 10 years of my employment. I had to learn all about those. I had to spend hours upon hours upon hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours reading about neuroscience, and because that is such a dynamic aspect of this change, this ability to link in a way that people can feel you. Somebody once told me when I was on an airplane to Amsterdam, I was talking to a lady and we were talking about communication. I said, how do you know that I'm hearing what you say? And this is a very astute lady now. Just blew me away when she just looked, in fact, it was interesting because I was in the center seat and she was on the left. And she kind of turned to me on my right and she looked dead in my eyes and she said, Vic, I don't want you to hear what I say. I want you to feel what I say. And I meant I was feeling it. I mean, we were close. Our proximity was close, which is a nonverbal cue, by the way. That was close. I could almost feel her emotions and the energy in her. That's what we're missing. That's what we haven't taught you to do. And that's what we can teach you to do. We just got to get it going. And it's just me, and I'm not a highly funded individual. I'm just out here trying to get the word out. So anything you can do to help me will help. Now, in doing this and collecting all of this stuff, I've written like 4 ebooks, and I made them ebooks on purpose. I'm tired of people reading in a paperback book and then they come up on something and everything. I wonder where you find that. I'd be interested in learning more about that. Now you have the link. You can stop right there. Go and put a marker in the book page right there on your phone. On your what do they call it, electronic book, and ebook, and you can bookmark it and hit that link and go find out all about emotional intelligence, or go find out about neuroplasticity, or go find out why women have a different prefrontal cortex than men, and why maybe they're more attuned to leadership because they can do this stuff I'm talking about maybe a little more effectively than men. Okay, so some thoughts for you to keep in mind. But anyway, those 4 books, I pulled them off of Amazon. I pulled them off of, actually, I only had one on Amazon at the time. And I have one on Apple. I'm going to pull that one off of Apple. I'm uncomfortable with those groups of folks right now. You got to live with them, okay? There's some things, they've got us locked into things, and when we got locked into them, we felt good about them. Now I'm not feeling as good about them. Not because of the politics, just because of the sense that they would use that wealth to manipulate. That bothers me a little bit. So, but anyway, I wanted to be able to see and engage with anybody who was buying the book, so that possibly if they wanted to talk and discuss things, that's an important part of this communication process. It's not asynchronous. You can kind of connect with me, and we can actually have a conversation about it. Might be really cool. Might learn something about it, and might learn something about each other. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I kind of put those into what I call my own personal bookstore. And I found this thing called Buy Me a Coffee. And I like that. It's a really nice place. You can place some things, and people can donate to you if they want. They don't have to. You can have a subscriber thing. I do. And if you go in there, I don't do much with the subscriber thing. I'm not big about paywalls. But, it's a way for people to get into a community potentially, and talk about this stuff amongst each other. But anyway, the books are in there, and I'll put a link to all of those. And what you do is you get a PDF link, and you'll get probably 2. One is a PDF link, and that's probably better used for cell phones and things like that. But then you have another link that's kind of, if you're on a full-size computer with a screen and you want to flip it like a book, and you got that link. And I'll put I did this through a group that uses AI to write books. Now, I write my books. What I did was use them to print a format that looks decent, because that's not my forte either. And I don't have money to pay somebody else to do it, so I had to find something that would let me. I could put down what I wrote, and they could put it in a format that made sense and looked good. So I do use AI for that kind of stuff, but this is my material. It's not AI's material. So what I get here is, it might be now, because they may have it all trained into one of their programs now. But anyway, that's beside the point. I don't care if it is or not. If it gets out to people is all I care about. So, but the books are there. You can buy them. If you take that link, yes, you can go send it to 100 people if you want, and you will have paid for the book, and other 100 people won't pay for the book. You can do that if you want. It's not really ethical, but if this is getting in the hands of people that'll help them, I don't care. So that's how I'm looking. That's one of the things you can't do on Amazon. Once you buy the book, you are locked into it. Nobody else can see it. Somebody else has to buy another book. It's kind of like if I bought a book and I gave it to my son to read. You can't do that on Amazon. You can't give it to well, you can now, but you have to kind of pay for it a little bit. So this you can. I'll just give you the links, and you can send them to whoever you want to send them to. If they want to pay something for them, fine. They can go buy their own book if they feel like it's going to be a resource they're going to want to use. Well, they have the resource, so they can do it anyway. But if they feel like it's something that was beneficial to them, you give them that link, they feel like tell them to go back to buy me a coffee and buy me some coffees. In fact, buy me enough coffees to equal $14.99. That would be the way you do that. So I don't care how you do that. I just want more and more people to get a hold of these books. And then I want people to start asking questions about how you can make this work better. And anybody who's in this field who can make it work better, we need to do it now. We need to get this into leadership development. It needs to be a curriculum. In fact, I'm so excited about this. It needs to go into high schools. Can you imagine your child coming out of high school? They don't go to college, but they have exceptional communication skills to communicate with other people, their boss and other people they work with. That is a phenomenal thing. Or that they can use these educational things. You could have a difficult discussion with somebody you think is bullying you. This came to me when I watched my son when he was like, I think 7 or 8 years old. We were in, I think it was Silver Springs, Florida, on one of those boat rides down a river. And this kid was sitting next to him and just kept, it's getting to the point where I was going to interrupt the kid and then talk to his parents. My son handled it beautifully. He turned to him and he said, why are you so mean? And it stopped the kid dead in his tracks. What it did, and I didn't realize, it's a neuroscience thing. The kid was locked into this left brain. I'm gonna control you. I'm gonna talk to you, and be negative and all that kind of stuff. And he just stopped the kid's thinking dead in his tracks. He said, "Why are you so mean?" And the kid had to stop thinking about being mean and think about why he was being mean, which is a right brain process. This is in, oh my God, the 80s, before neuroscience was really a prominent thing. And I was thinking, wow, he's got this. So I sat back and I watched him. They were friends before they got off the boat. They were friends. He used emotional intelligence and good communication technique to engage someone who was having an angry intent towards him. And I have never forgotten that. And I've always tried to figure out, how do you handle someone who's coming at you, And that's why if you have an angry boss that's yelling at you, you don't have to give up on the boss. You might be able to help your boss. Now, I've talked a whole lot about this, probably longer than I wanted to, but I wanted to let you know those books were on buymeacoffee.com, and I will put that link in there. I want you to get excited about thinking about this process and ask yourself, is this something that I missed in my development as a leader? Or if you're somebody who is really got it together in this area and this is your field, you're a psychologist, you're a psychiatrist, you're a therapist, or you're a coach, or a leader, and you're developing other leaders and you're going, I think I understand this. Have you thought about this? We can build this even better. We can make this even better. This isn't mine. This belongs to the world of leadership and to the world of communication and social psychology. So I'd be really excited if anybody's interested in wanting to talk about it. I think that's all I had to say to you today. I've just had a lot of fun with it, just thinking about it. Just going back over my history was fascinating. I started my first leadership role at 20 years old in Special Forces as a second lieutenant after coming out of OCS, after going through all of the other programs and then coming out of OCS and then going to Special Forces School and then being assigned to an A-team, where, by the way, is an extremely unique environment in itself. where team building and where the team is linked almost in a brotherhood. Think about that dynamic in a department. It would be pretty phenomenal. I was extremely blessed. I had no idea what I was doing or what I was able to grasp and learn from this. But you get to go back and call on your history at times. And when you do, sometimes it comes forth the answer that has been before your face the whole time, but you just recognize it all of a sudden. Then you have a multitude of experiences and people and companies to practice it on. That was pretty phenomenal for me. So if you're interested in any of this, you can contact me. If you're interested in the books, you can pick up the books. Yes, you're going to have the link. And if you want to give it to somebody else, go ahead, give it to somebody else. I'm not going to get pissed. If they like it, just have them go give me a coffee. And if all they can afford is one coffee, $1, that I think is the lowest one, that's fine. Anything and everything you do, I appreciate, because I don't expect it from you, to be honest with you. So, anyway, I hope you have a good day. I hope this helps you grasp some ideas about how you might become a better leader, or if you want to be a leader and you're in college or you're in a position where you'd like to lead, then that's fine. Also, if you happen to be the world's best salesman and they tell you they'd like you to be the sales manager, I'd like you to think about some of this stuff before you say yes, because it may not be right for you. And that's part of what you discover from Shirzad Samin's positive intelligence. Is that really you? Are you really a leader? Is that your thing? Or do you really just love sales? But even in sales, I'm thinking this is how you're connecting. Most likely you're creating this experience naturally, probably. And I don't know how you got it, because you probably weren't taught communication. So, you got whatever you know from influencers that you were with, and that's how we tend to think we're learning. But this is one of those things you can actually learn and develop and grow, and then get with experienced people to help you hone it and tune it and make it really work for you. You have a great day. Again, a lot of contact information, where the books are and everything, going to be in the description of this, and we'll put this into a timeline. It's one of the things I can use AI for. I just send them the video and say, print a timeline with the key points, and boom, it's there. So use that stuff. Use that stuff. All right, have a good day.